Hey, well, welcome everyone to the Mind of Christ here on YouTube. My name is Justin Amos, and I'm joined today by my good friend and new author, Kelsey Irwin. Kelsey just released her book, Attendeth My Way, that came out November 1st, so just less than a week ago. So we're going to get a chance to hear a little bit about Kelsey's life and just kind of her heart behind this book and how it relates to mental health, what this channel is all about. And so if you stick around at the end, we're going to be giving away 2 free books autographed by Kelsey. So stick around at the end, and we're going to show you how you can enter to win 2 of those books. So Kelsey, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself for people that don't know you, just a little bit about your life. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And yeah, I grew up in Northwest Missouri, and I went to college and got an English teaching degree. And so then I taught middle and high school language arts for a few years, and then coached some softball and basketball in there as well. Took up photography, and then started staying home when I started having kids. And so now I have 4 kids, and I'm home with them, and wrote this book in the midst of that whole life. So
Awesome. Good. So tell us why this book? Why is this book needed? What's the heart behind Attendeth My Way?
Well, I think it was obviously birthed from a lot of my own experience of wrestling with, is peace really for here and now, or is it just something that we get in heaven? And the more I started to really think through those things, the more I realized a lot of other people are having those same questions. And so I really just wanted to dig into the Bible and really look at what was it that Jesus promised when he left us. And the more I did that, the more I realized peace is something he promised us here on this earth, and not just one day when we're in heaven with him, but right now and right here in the midst of a lot of different messes and griefs and all of that as well. So it resonated with me, and so the more I started talking to people, I realized it would resonate with others as well.
So the subtitle for your book is Peace for the Here and Now. Peace is something that a lot of people struggle with not experiencing, especially people with mental illness, seem to long for peace. So what's kind of your hope in a nutshell for this book for people that struggle with mental illness, mental health? Like what would you hope, what's your hope that they take away from reading Attendeth My Way?
Yeah, well, just really, I think a lot of the struggling with mental health is this mental remapping that has to occur, and isolating these lies that we tell ourselves and replacing them with truth. And so I littered this book with biblical truths, but I wanted to do it in a practical way. So in grief, in change, in relationships, in these street level things that we're all facing. And so yes, there's hope in the biblical truth that we can put into our minds in a real tangible way, but also in a street level practical way that hopefully people can see how it applies just in the middle of their real messy lives.
In chapter 9 of your book, Peace and Community, you talk about how many of the times where you felt God's peace the most is when you've been doing life with other people. And you bring in some other data from various resources that talk about how isolating can literally take years off of your life. And isolation is a pretty common struggle for a lot of people battling mental health issues because we're ashamed to get help. We're perhaps afraid to admit the thoughts that we're thinking or the feelings that we're having. So what advice would you give someone that's listening or watching from home that is isolating and they're holding everything in order for us to heal and be whole, we have to allow ourselves to be known, to be vulnerable. So what advice would you give someone that's kind of living a life of isolation and, what are they maybe missing out on in relation to God's peace?
Yeah. I actually quote this in the book is, if you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, there's Frodo who has to carry the ring to Mordor and throw it in the fire. And it's this heavy burden, and it's this thing, but he wants to do it himself. He's like, I don't need people. I can do this. I can go on the journey, and I can take care of this thing. But what you see is he needs the fellowship. He needs the people with him. And there's this quote that Samwise, his friend that's with him through the whole thing, says. He says, I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you. And I think that's such a good picture of what community can do for us. Is there are times they can't carry the things we're going through necessarily, but they can carry us through them. And I think we look at the hard work or the vulnerability that it'll take, and it is scary. And there is this piece that, this element that we think, that's too terrifying, I don't want to do it. But I think what we find is when we're willing to step into those spaces that a lot of times God sends his peace to us through other people. And you look at God, and he's in the Trinity himself. He's in community at all times. And so it's a way for us to mirror his image also. And I love, there's a passage in the Bible where it talks about Moses is having to fight, and there's the Amalekites. And God says, you're going to defeat the Amalekites as long as you raise your hands while you're fighting them. But Moses gets tired, and he has to put his hands down. And so Hur and Aaron come, and they hold his hands up. And there's actually a passage, I have it here, that I wanted to read the verse. It says, Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady until sunset. And so as Moses is doing that, it allows Joshua to overcome the Amalekites. And I just think that that's a picture of what community looks like for us when we're struggling with no matter what we're struggling with, whether it's a mental health issue or it's a tangible physical need that we need help with. God can send his people to keep our hands steady until sunset in a lot of those situations that we just can't. We're tired and we can't do it on our own. And so to me, that's such a beautiful picture of what community can do and how God can send his peace in those circumstances through other people.
In chapter 10 of your book, Peace in the Unknown, Not Into the Unknown,
No.
featuring Elsa, even though that would have been funny. You talk about how, those of us in Christ, we're united with him. We are seated with Christ right now, and we are fully one with him. And how when we understand that reality, it makes us much less likely to allow our minds to spiral out of control and believe a bunch of false realities when life is really difficult, when our circumstances, might get the best of us. So for those watching that claim to be Christians, how do we better see ourselves as being seated with Christ and grasping that we are one with him? Like what advice or encouragement would you give to help us better live into that reality? Or maybe even what does that practically look like in your life?
Yeah, I think it kind of goes back to that replacement that we're trying to do all the time mentally too, is we need to understand we are safe, we are loved, we are free in him. And so what has to happen with that is when we're spiraling, we're starting to live as orphans. We're not seeing ourselves seated at the table with him as a son or a daughter. And so we're starting to believe these lies. And so to tell ourselves that we are united with Christ, or that Christ is, it says in the Bible, we are seated with him right now, today, in heaven, which is just this mind-blowing thing to think about. And it's not just a mantra that we repeat to ourselves, but it's this actual reality. Yeah. And so I think the practical part of that is taking time to just sit in quiet and picture yourself there. Picture yourself with Christ today. And it says that the angels are in heaven saying, holy, holy, holy. And we're there too. Like we're a part of that. And because we're united with him. And so I think just taking the time to picture that, that's really the bedrock of where our peace comes from, is that we are covered in Christ. We don't have to be perfect here. We don't have to be in control of things here, because he's covering us today. And it says he's interceding for us even now. And so I think just as we do that, as we repeat that to ourselves and we picture that in our minds, we start to realize we are safe, we are loved, we are free. And that starts to settle those thoughts that can start to spiral when we see that as a reality.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kelsey, for joining us and for giving us your time. So now we're going to give you guys the opportunity to win 2 free books autographed by Kelsey. So there's 3 things you have to do to get a free book. You need to like this video, subscribe to The Mind of Christ here on YouTube, and just comment. You can just comment with the name of the book, Attendeth My Way. You could just say peace. You could say Kelsey, free book, anything, just so we kind of know you're in the system. And we will be announcing the winners 1 week from today. If you'd like to go ahead and purchase the book now for yourself or a loved one, we will drop a link below to her book on Amazon for you to purchase. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. See you later.